All right, here we go. So tip number one, we're going to talk about the life cycle or the training life cycle. So what this means is not just about your age, but it's about how long you've been training in a certain way and what type of experience that sort of gives you and how your results will go with that. So if we look at our chart here, we've got time on the bottom and we've got gains on the vertical axis. So what happens here is that in the beginning, you're going to make this phase here, you're going to make most of the easy gains, those beginner gains. After that beginner phase, things start to taper off and your progress slows down. You go through, you end up in a more advanced phase, somewhere in here, where you're basically making very little progress, so you have to work extremely hard to make any gains, but also you're at that point where you've kind of becoming a very experienced, you know all the ins and outs of what you're doing, and it's more about just fine tuning. And then the final phase is where you've already peaked and your progress starts to go down. Now this is a long way into the life cycle of training. It can be 10, 20, 30 years of training, and you start to not make any progress anymore really, and you start to decline. At that point, we don't need to talk about it too much, but really you're trying to hold on to everything you've earned prior to that. But what I do want to touch on mostly today, to keep it short, is these first two phases here, this beginner phase and this kind of intermediate. So in the beginner phase, your primary objectives are just turn up and then be safe and listen to the coaching. So by just turning up and being safe and sensible, you're going to make excellent progress. Your body is still completely new to training or this style of training, and so it's just ready to improve. The key things there with the being safe are just usually overdoing it or getting too excited. We see this a lot with people who start running and they will just run and run and run, and then like in 2 weeks, they're very sore and their body might even have a slight injury. However, if you just are sensible, you're going to make great progress. So turn up, be safe, listen to the coaching, and do the best you can to improve technique and understand what you're trying to do. The next phase, intermediate phase, is more about fine-tuning and starting to understand the details. So there, turning up doesn't guarantee progress anymore. You must turn up and start to work on specific things. The rest of our tips in this series are going to focus more on what you can focus on in that intermediate phase to keep you progressing. Because there, it doesn't come for free anymore. You have to start working on it. You have to start having a purpose when you turn up, having some details to focus on, having a certain approach to each workout that's going to allow you to keep making progress and fix the things that are holding you back, and start to make sure that you're not going to taper off too early. Because here, this intermediate phase can last many, many years, and many, many years of progress, as long as you're addressing the things that need to be addressed to keep you making progress. So tip number one really is to understand this, have a little think about where you are. Beginner phase can last a couple of years, or it can only be a few months, depends who you are. But intermediate phase, many, many, many years, so usually. And so that's the phase where quite many of our folks end up in their CrossFit journey. But thanks for listening today, and see you again next one.